Hey there, folks. Mark Edwards here, and you're watching the Ultraviolet podcast. And today, I have the pleasure of talking to Vadim from the HeyItsVadim YouTube channel. Now, Vadim came to my attention in the past couple months when he put out a really excellent piece of investigative journalism on Tim Pool. Tim Pool, many of you may know, is the beanie-wearing, bespectacled dork who makes millions of dollars promoting right-wing nonsense and conspiracy theories by pretending to be a liberal on YouTube. Vadim did an excellent job going into Tim Pool's history, how he effectively lied and grifted his way into his position, and exposes a lot of his ties to some really nasty guys with connections to right-wing white identitarian politics in Western Europe. It's a great piece. I highly recommend everybody go check it out. Vadim followed that up with another piece of excellent journalism doing a similar deep dive into Lauren Southern and her connection to white identitarian alt-right figures and how she inserted herself into this ecosystem of white nationalist public figures who ultimately precipitated the Christchurch shooting. It's a really phenomenal piece of journalism. It's funny where it can be and very serious where it should be, and I highly recommend you check that out as well. In the interview, Vadim and I spend the first half talking about his personal history as a YouTuber, how he sort of came of age and cut his teeth on the YouTube scene as being involved in the New Atheist movement and the Skeptic community. He talks about how he eventually left that community as it became progressively more and more toxic and difficult to be in. We both talk about our personal histories with figures in that community and how we came to be in the New Atheist movement and then move out of it. We talk a lot about the failures of New Atheism as a movement and how it eventually came to be the thing that it is today, which is a cesspool of just toxic masculinity and psychopathic grifters who are manipulating people into, at times, dominionist Christian ideology and other such nonsense. Following that, we get into talking about how he came to do the Tim Pool video. We talk about some stuff that wasn't in the video relating to Tim Pool and his character and his associations. And then we talk about Lauren Southern and again, talk about some things that didn't make it into the video that he had to cut for time. We talk about how she developed her relationships with figures in the alt-right and came to be in the position that she is today. It was an excellent interview. I really enjoyed it. I was really happy to have Vadim on the show. Before we get to it, however, obviously, if you've listened this far, you should know that this whole episode just has one big giant content warning all over it. When we're talking about these people and the movements that we're talking about, it's going to happen. Like, we hit pretty much every single horrible thing that a person could discuss. We talk about it. Racism, transphobia, misogyny, white supremacy, the Great Replacement, anti-Semitism, just, we hit all, like, every single thing on the bingo card we touch on. So if any of that is going to cause you psychic damage, if it's going to be upsetting to you in any way, then I would recommend that you skip this episode, and I will not take it personally. I will see you on the next one. And with that out of the way, and without any further delay, I give you Vadim. Hey, it's Vadim. Hey, thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Nice to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you came to my attention, I think, along with a lot of other people, with your Tim Pool video.
Oh, right.
And I am prepared. I've got the beanie. I've got the neck beard. I'm ready to
Yeah,
play.
you're working it.
Um,
Yeah, there's actually two somewhat recent like Tim Pool videos, but I would say that the second of the two, even though I happen to think they're both
mhm.
pretty damning and entertaining as well, if I do say so myself.
I say
But
so as well.
but the second of the two is definitely the one. I believe it's titled "How Tim Pool um lied his way to YouTube fame."
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good one to check out.
And then you just recently, within the last couple days of this conversation, as we're recording it, released another video, a very excellent video that everybody should check out as well, on Lauren Southern and her involvement in the ecosystem that eventually produced the Christchurch shooting. Christ,
Yes,
yeah.
it's titled "The Truth About Lauren Southern and the Christchurch Shooting," and I felt very motivated to make that video for two reasons. One, because she has addressed it in this absolutely horseshit video. I can I curse here? Is that
Oh yeah,
cool?
say whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, in just an absurd horseshit video. It's one of her worst, and it's like, it's funny because honestly, I expect bad arguments from right wingers a lot of the time, but sometimes right wingers have to adopt uh kind of messages or not opinions, but just make points that are truly brainless, and if you really analyze them, they just they're like rice paper thin.
Yeah.
And she in order to cut, I mean, the whole video is addressing that
Mhm.
situation, and every step of the way she just kind of either tells lies by omission or gives these really horrible excuses, what I think amount to that. And then on top of that, she's also started clawing her way back to relevancy
Yeah.
in not just the left wing YouTube, Twitch sphere, but also now, I mean, due to her being able to do that, now she's kind of making the rounds again, in like the right wing
Mhm.
sphere. Like, she was interviewed by the Daily Caller recently and whatnot.
Mhm.
So I felt very motivated to get it out there because honestly, there's a great deal of things about her history with all of that that people just don't know. That is
Yeah.
among some of the absolute worst things that she ever did. And so, yeah, it took a while to research, but
Yeah.
I'm happy with the results.
It was, both of those, videos were very well researched, and I would highly recommend, everybody who's watching go out and check them out.
Mm.
And I do wanna talk about both of them
Yeah,
in depth, but before we do that, let's, maybe just introduce everybody to who you are, who may not be familiar with you or your content.
sure.
Tell us a little bit about Vadim and how Vadim came to be doing the YouTubes.
Well, my name is Vadim. The channel is Hey It's Vadim. For years, it was a channel called Creationist Cat, and maybe we can get into this more
Mhm.
substantially. But I'll give like sort of a nutshell. The channel started out in the early days, in the kind of uh, I would say atheist slash skeptic sphere, and that's something that I really, over the course of time, I would say, especially within the past 5 years, started really trying to distance myself from.
Mhm.
I mean, to tell you the truth, I was trying to distance myself from it, probably even before then, because a lot of people don't realize there was a short period of time where, and I would say that it was probably before like YouTube profit incentives. Like in the beginning, a lot of people were mostly making videos not under the expectation that they were going to be making money and whatnot. And then Gamergate happened. I mean, again, we can get more. I'll just
Mhm.
kind of wrap this up. But I, I'll just say that one stumbling block for me in terms of getting my work out there has been this perception that some people have of me kind of being wrapped into that. And there's a good deal of people who are, I would say, like in left tube or what
Mhm.
have you, that know that I've made that change. But I can't tell you how often I still get messages from people saying like, "Oh, I just figured you were some kind of asshole," because nearly everybody in that, and it's true, they are
Yeah.
correct. Nearly
Yeah.
everyone, and there's some other, decent exceptions besides myself,
Mhm.
who did not fall into that trap really, and they're very few and far between. And I have a lot more to say about that. Maybe we can hit that. But
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah, I
go
just
go
kind of
into it
want to.
now if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I want to, because it's something I could go on for a while about. But yeah, I really did feel that. I mean, early on there was this like I said, I feel like it was kind of a positive, like,
Mhm.
sphere of YouTube. Well, like for instance, one thing that a lot of people don't know is that with the alt-right surge on YouTube that started occurring, which is to some degree not as much of a problem as it was. It In some ways it is, and I some people don't I think acknowledge it as much as it should be. But before that ever occurred, like for instance, there was a like a pocket of a much smaller pocket than the whole alt-right craze created, of people who were like basically like into phrenology and into just making all these arguments about IQ and the superiority of white. It was
Yeah.
all
It's like race
um
realism and
yeah,
scientific
it was race.
racism and all that shit.
Absolutely, race realism is probably the best way to put it. Although I don't like that term just because there's nothing real about it.
Right, right.
Um, and there were these excellent YouTubers at the time, people who no one really knows the names of anymore, who just nipped that in the bud. They were able to have there were these very um there's a series of people who were just very adept with that sort of scientific knowledge, and there were a series of debates, and these people got blown out of the water. And they basically the whole that whole scene just kind of retreated
Mhm.
because they were just sort of shown to be erroneous, and maybe that's am I misusing that word. They were just shown to be lolcows and wrong. And so when it came back into conversation, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And there were a lot of, over the course of my time within that sphere, there were a lot of times where I honestly was sort of like, oh my God, it can't get any worse. It can't. Oh no, there's Nazis now. People
Yeah.
are having conversations with Nazis. Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
I did end up paying sort of a price for it, because I will be honest about this. I did speak up about it way sooner than probably nearly anyone else did. There's probably one or two other people within the sphere that did, but this was at a time when and I wasn't just objecting to that. I was objecting to other reactionary aspects of the scene that developed, because basically this I think that this is very common knowledge, but all these people calling themselves skeptics, they were anything but, at least when it comes to what I think of as
Mhm.
what real skepticism is. Although that I think that they have effectively flushed that term down the toilet,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And so my point is that there was I was actually surprised that it didn't happen sooner, but there was a point where I was kind of thriving as a channel. And then those who unfortunately were in my sphere, and I wish that they weren't, but it's kind of I don't know. I don't know if you want to call it guilt by association or what, but I had this sort of mass calling out on in that sphere. And as a matter of fact, if you're familiar with Sean,
Hmm.
he's an excellent YouTuber. There was a video that was made that he took down, and it was all about me. Although you wouldn't know it if you had watched his video, and it was kind of just debunking all these things that were about the like the SJWs this person made a video about, and they used me as a pivot point in order to talk about all these things because they contended, and I was friends with these people, but this person saw it as like at the time as some like horrible thing, and it was very over the top. It was like the team is part of the SJWs, and at the time this YouTuber who's actually changed quite a lot, and were funny enough not on bad terms, but he also, another thing that he did within the video was he alleged that I was trying to stage some sort of mutiny with Sargon of Akkad, and I've always I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah, no, fuck
Horrible,
that dude.
yeah, dude sucks ass.
Yeah, he's a
But
grade A piece of shit. That is the
yeah,
party
yeah,
line of
and
Ultraviolet podcast. Fuck Sargon.
and I've always disliked this guy, and more so over time, but I didn't like him from the get-go. And I would have conversations with this particular person and some others in a chat, and he basically portrayed it as, and Vadim, excuse me, and Vadim tried to stage a mutiny where he told us that we had to rise up against Sog. I mean, he put it in these really melodramatic terms, and the truth of the matter was is that I was just like in these conversations, just like, yeah, fuck that guy. I really don't like. It was just that I was never
Yeah.
like, I probably should have. I would have been within my right to say let's stage a mutiny. But anyway, my point is that this video is made, and then right after that, within a month, about two or three other videos by big YouTubers, I think sort of like sharks sniffing blood in the water, decided to make some videos. And I had been, I don't know, growing at a rate of 2 to 3,000 subs at least a month, sometimes more. And all of a sudden, I lost about, I think, 15, 16, 17,000 subs, which was, it's bad for any YouTuber, but particularly bad because I had way less than I have now. And my point in bringing that up is that it when you lose a lot of subs, and just there were a lot of repercussions for it,
Mhm.
and it sort of took a while to get my channel back on track. And the last thing that I'll say is the channel used to be, I think I mentioned this, but just so your viewers know, used to be called Creationist Cat, and it was a bit more comedy oriented. I would say my videos are still pretty comedy oriented, but it had a character by the name of Creationist Cat who who was sort of this cat who is a talking cat and thinks he was zapped by God through the internet, and he's kind of an idiot. He's sort of a cross between Homer Simpson and maybe Stephen Colbert on the back in the Colbert Report days.
Mhm.
Um, and it's hard to explain. It's more something that you have to experience. And I continued doing that character over time. Like, again, I was trying to separate myself so much more and more all the time that I stopped in videos for the most part calling him Creationist Cat. I just call him CC because, you know, I guess another thing that I'll throw out there, I hope I'm not like kind of going too all over the place here, but I've never
No, we're
had,
we're here to you're here to
yeah,
talk, man.
yeah. Although I would say overall, I am not as a rule, kind of crazy about religion. I think that it's sort of like this construct that it has done definitely done some good within the world, but I you know I won't go into all the ins and outs of things that I don't like about it. But the one thing that I want to say is that I've always held the position, and some people, again, because the atheist community is the way that it is, a lot of people have kind of mistakenly believed that, say, I just look down on all religious people, and I certainly don't. There are plenty of people like I really just have a problem with two things. I have a problem when people take beliefs to a fundamentalist place, and moreover, I have a problem when those beliefs that they are trying to kind of uh implement those, either especially in law, or if they are kind of getting overly moralistic and kind of putting out a really bad message that ends up being hateful or kind of hurts marginalized groups, or say obstructs a woman's right to those are the things, like it I have tons of friends who are religious in pretty much every major religion, and tons of them are, I mean, are like fucking super smart and way smarter than a lot of atheist. And I guess this is the very last thing I'll say on that. A lot of people think that atheists, and it's true, a lot of people atheists, a lot of people think atheists have this attitude that, like, being an atheist gives them some sort of Mensa card, like it
Mhm.
makes them smart, and that alone, no, it's just, it's a pretty basic belief. Yeah, so I don't know. I will leave that closed because I've been speaking a lot, and maybe there's more that I can get into as we go on to sort of like
Yeah.
refine that all that. But one last thing is, I started, I'd say, in about 2017, injecting myself as a character within the videos pretty consistently, and then it just felt like it was time for a change.
Mm.
Numerous reasons. One is it just felt like of another time, even though that I think I enjoy a lot of those videos, and I wanted to do something different. That was really the biggest thing. I like to kind of like challenge myself and do things new. And I think CC was a good mouthpiece for issues having to do with religion, but I think it's just easier and more relatable to have just a one on one.
Mm.
People don't always know what CC is. Not everybody likes CC, but
Yeah.
go
I
ahead.
actually, so now that you've described it, I
Mm,
actually do remember Cece. So I also cut my teeth in the new atheist movement,
mhm,
and I'm very thankful that I did not have a YouTube channel when I was um, a regular listener of Sam Harris's show.
right.
Um, yeah, but I think that's something that I've encountered a lot. I've heard a lot of people from that movement say and describe similar things to what you've described, where it was a community where they felt alienated from religion. They didn't like what religion was doing, but they found themselves bedfellows with people who were really there just to be hateful and vindictive,
Mhm,
and that was their mechanism by which to do it. They weren't there because they cared about rationality or the philosophy of humanism. They used
mhm,
those things as cudgels to hurt other people with, and
yeah,
they were there for the sadism. And then Gamergate happened and blew the lid off that whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
I know I've had Dave from Echoplex Media on the show who was big into that scene as well. Um, and I know I've heard Godless Cranium, who I believe changed the
Hmm.
name of their channel as well recently, and like the focus of it, and like um,
Watson.
Rebecca Watson, and then Rebecca, I can't remember her last name, but there's another YouTuber who I'm familiar with, who I'll link in the bottom. But there's this whole exodus of people who left this movement because they realized they were essentially hanging out with people like Sargon, who were
Yeah.
using social justice warrior as a pejorative for people who just wanted rights for other people.
Absolutely. It got the just so I can kind of
Mhm.
flesh that out a little bit. It I would say that the worst place that it got was on YouTube. However, this I mean, I'm sure this is not news to you, but it infected the real world. I mean, lots of people who I had admiration for more and more over the years have just really disappointed. I mean, there's barely anyone who is. I mean, I would like when I think of people who have not uh, like there's like two or three. Like Bill Nye is someone and it's not like these people were like out. He has spoken about atheism, but it's not like his thing. So like really, I almost don't think I can think of a mega popular atheist who has not done a bunch of shit that you can have a big problem with. And
Yeah.
it's sad. Also, another thing that I'll say is that I wish it wasn't the case. Things are what they are. Maybe over time somehow things can kind of rearrange themselves, like and we can have kind of a different landscape, but these problems are still going on. There are
Mhm.
still people who are affected by religion who need some sort of community when they come out of it. And lastly, there are groups and individuals who are trying to put forth really bad legislation that I mean harmful legislation that for the really ostensibly these are kind of religious arguments
Mhm.
that their efforts are based on. And so it's sort of like it's sad because it's like atheism I feel could be more of a tool of the left, and I would want it to be something that is an ally to any well, what's the word when you're when you're religious yet you still very much believe in separation of church and state. There's a word for it
Mhm.
that is just
Moderate,
no, it's not.
secular.
Secular, yes.
Yeah.
That believe in secular values. um or yeah. I think that that's sort of like a prerequisite. But I'd like to be able for it to be something that people don't have to kind of like be embarrassed of or disown, and can kind of help people like because nobody on YouTube or at least LeftTube who is not no one who is not like an atheist YouTuber really wants to hold that moniker anymore.
Mhm.
And it's yeah, it's because of all this shit. It's like, and most maybe not most, but a great deal of left tubers who are very influential are, and when they bring it up, they're just like, yeah, I'm this. But and I don't blame them, I mean, I'm the
Yeah.
same way. So
Well, I think the big problem with movement atheism was that it was a culture based around being the antithesis of something else and
mhm.
attacking something else. It was it was geared around, it was like centered around this nucleus of antagonism, which was at its core, where we're going to destroy religion, we're going to attack all these other things. And then eventually, like, if you have that, your legions of people focused on, tearing things down, it's very easy to shift that gear, particularly when, the majority of your fans are young, white,
Yeah,
angry people. You can just be like, okay, well, now we're going to do feminists, and now
I
we're going to do trans people,
I
now we're
I
going to do
I
Muslims.
I think it definitely see the thing is that a lot of people just not are shocking. A lot of people just don't have a lot of intelligence, and so it's easier to get like feminism. I mean, their arguments against feminism were dog shit. Came from a really kind of they had no knowledge of what it actually was. They were always attacking some sort of straw man. But I do think if you look and he's someone who certainly I won't go into the myriad of ways, but someone like Richard Dawkins is someone who over the years has been a huge disappointment in my opinion. But if you look at his early work, he was known for in some circles of being sort of like this antagonistic person. I don't think it like, and I'm separating it from like the horse shit that he'd say about feminism and a range of other topics. But in the beginning, I think that his level of antagonism, if I'm talking about like his early documentaries and stuff, I'm talking like around 2012, whatever. He made these I mean of course books as well, but documentaries where he was really kind of looking at kind of I guess just religion from I think the standpoint of someone who really admired nature from a scientific point of view, and moreover he hit other things like he had specials on tackling homeopathy, on tackling astrology and things like that, which are all worthy concepts of kind of looking at and really saying like, okay, why do we believe these things? What is the and it's like that's kind of where I thought, and it was, but for a while in early like YouTube, a lot of people don't realize this, but there were a range of people who were kind of like not just focusing on creationism and things like that. They were tackling all of these sort of things that like someone like James Randi, I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Hmm. Yeah.
really kind of like classic old school, like one of the last true skeptics were tackling. So they could have funneled it into certain things. And I think I do agree with you very
Hmm.
much so that people kind of, and because it's not just atheism itself, it's also the nature of the internet that
Hmm.
kind of breeds this like sort of like must destroy mentality. But I think that a big when it started going into feminism, aside from the fact that I could tell that there were all these shitty arguments about it, and I will, I can kind of get into this a bit later. There was a certain degree, not strongly such, but there was a small amount that for a very brief period I started buying some of the bullshit because it was around me so much.
Hmm.
I do want to clarify later about what that was, just so that people are clear.
Sure.
But my point is that from an early point, like when people started talking about that, at first I thought, oh, this has to be like a passing phase. Like this can't last. And the people never gave it up. But my real point in all this is that I think that skepticism, if you're talking about what I believe skepticism actually to be, rather than kind of like this kind of bullshit, it was sort of uh like a Peanuts cartoon, like that character who's the one who always takes the football away from Charlie Brown? Lucy.
Oh, Peppermint Patty?
No. Oh, is it Peppermint Patty?
No, it's
No,
not.
it's
It's
it's it's
Peppermint Patty's girlfriend.
uh,
Um,
I think it's Lucy. The
Lucy. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
And she would often have this like doctor's booth that she like made, and she'd put a sign in it that says like doctor in session, and she wasn't a doctor. So it reminds me of that, where people are just kind of like imposing, just taking a crude sign saying skeptic and they're anything fucking but. And so where I'm going with this is that they started applying skepticism supposedly to subjects that really are not cut out for skepticism. Skepticism to me should be applied to things where there aren't so many variables that where you can really kind of test the
Hmm.
every now and then there are certain kind of claims made that maybe you can, but for the most part, like, feminism is this very difficult thing to pin down. And, you can take so many different interpretations, this person's and that person's. And it's just not something that I think is cut out for
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
It's
And
actually an interesting point because I think that might be a major, like, what part of the problem was is skepticism relies on an empirical analysis of a claim that can be tested empirically, right? Like,
yeah.
does homeopathy work? Do we have evidence for X? And what happened was that people started trying to evaluate things empirically that do not admit of an empirical analysis,
Hmm.
like philosophy or ethics, hashtag Sam Harris. Like that whole, like, we're going to attempt to, not only are we going to attempt to empirically evaluate things that don't admit of that analysis,
Uh-huh.
if a thing does not admit of that analysis, it is by definition unworthy of our attention and should be marginalized and pushed to the side. And that extra step there is, I think, where it kind of went over the edge.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. I think that there's a few kind of factors at play that's definitely part of it. I think that there is sort of like this inherent, or not maybe inherent, but often you'd find that, I mean, like someone like Sam Harris is one of the most like how can I explain, headstrong. He is one. He's an egomaniac,
mhm,
which I think a lot of people don't see it because he has this very kind of beatific way
mhm.
of talking, and he's always talking uh l- like some sort of zen master, and he, every
I'm
now and
I'm
then
confident that's the only thing he actually learned in the 10 years he spent in Nepal on his mom's trust fund account
yeah.
was, he didn't actually learn self-reflection, God knows, he
His
didn't pick
mom
up
who
any of
wrote
that.
the theme to the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
But
know
yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah, I think she was like a producer or something for the Golden Girls, but yeah, he spent 10 years in Nepal in his 20s, tripping on acid, hanging out with, like, Nepalese Buddhist monks, which
Yes.
total envy, like, I wish I could have done that in my 20s, like, I'm not knocking him for that.
Yeah.
What I'm knocking him for is that the only thing he seemed to actually learn, because he didn't pick up an ounce of self-reflection or internal analysis, what he learned was how to talk like somebody who knew those things, and to present his arguments in a way that if you that it's obvious that he has some level of, like, enlightened information that he can bestow upon you just by virtue of his, big genius brain that he has. That's what he learned in that country or
It
in his travels.
it's kind of insidious because the
Mhm.
man is incredibly well spoken. You have to give that to him.
Mhm.
And he I see how people are seduced by his overall demeanor and whatnot, and listen to this guy and just think like, "Oh, this guy must be infallible." He comes across like a genius, and perhaps if he wasn't so, just like I said, just like cocksure of himself and incapable, in my opinion, of almost incapable of um really kind of taking on new like he has his beliefs, and like a lot there's a good deal of them that are just not fleshed out, like, I mean,
Yeah.
he will, like, I don't know, it thinks that Black Lives Matter for the most part is just an unnecessary, divisive, purely divisive, that it holds no utility. I mean, you could go on and on. There's so
Yeah.
many
I mean,
things.
it's entirely surface level analysis
Mhm.
presented as though it is a deep reflection on a complex issue.
Yeah.
It's a 15-year-old high off their tits
Mhm.
coming up with an idea for the first time. It's that like, "Bro, did you know that you can feel ways about stuff?" It's that level of thinking being presented as though it is a deep, rigorous, scientific understanding of the world, and if you scratch the surface, there's just an abyss underneath it.
Absolutely, and yeah, and he's so a lot of the scientific things that he believes. I mean, I'm not saying all of it. Certainly, like maybe his thoughts on creationism and things like that are
Mhm,
sound. But there's a wide range of things that he just I won't go into them, that he
mhm,
kind of holds as just he presents as like scientific fact, which in fact or not. I mean, he's also a bit of a champion of Charles Murray, which is real yikesy stuff.
mhm,
For those who don't know, Charles Murray is one of the authors of The Bell Curve. And so he was kind of responsible for reigniting this interest in race and IQ, which is I'm sure a heavily flawed field, and all kinds of things that are fucked up about Charles Murray in particular. But yeah, I think that that's emblematic of the kind of more mainstream atheism. And then you I believe that there's been a cross pollination of online atheism with real world atheism. They both kind of affected one another, but now you have people like Richard Dawkins praising people like, I don't know if you're familiar with James Lindsay. He's this
mhm.
crazy, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I
Shitting on James Lindsay is a pastime on this channel.
yeah, he's insane. I mean, he might not be insane. He might just it might be pure grift, and
S
everything that he says is
Yeah.
like, calculated to make money, but the
Well, I think he's a
certainly
good example of,
yeah.
like, the audience creator radicalization feedback loop.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
he started out like, Lindsay actually is really interesting because he is also came out of New Atheism,
Mhm.
right? His early career was writing he basically was trying to be the next Sam Harris for
Yeah.
most of his career, like, he wrote a bunch of really shitty books. Unfortunately for him, unlike Sam Harris, who is actually reasonably intelligent and a good communicator at least, Lindsay is a garbage person with no talent whatsoever in any regard.
Yeah.
So all his books were terrible, but he went to those conferences, he hung out with in that circle, and
Mhm.
then eventually found a grift that he could work with. And now, oddly enough, his career is if you haven't followed the last like
Oh, I have.
3 months of Lindsay's career, he's basically working as an operative for the largest Christian conservative movement in this country.
Yes, he's
Like
bankrolled by them.
essentially, yeah, pushing dominionist Christian ideology. So that was, so
Yeah.
that's what new atheism gets you at this point.
Yep. It's really sad. It's very odd seeing this sort of just meeting of it's similar to, I mean, I assume you're familiar with like TERFs, trans
Mm,
exclusionary radical feminists.
yeah.
It reminds me a bit of that, because TERFs, I mean, they call themselves radical feminists, but they're they're anything but.
Yeah.
And there's all this kind of
Yes. Scratch a turf and a fascist bleeds.
it's not just that. I mean, that's certainly true. I agree with that. But literally, there are some. I mean, there are turf groups that are pure astroturf that that are just fronts for religious groups. But moreover than that, you have one just actual they work together to they actually like meet together and whatnot. And on top of that, you'll have so many religious groups who use sites, turf sites. And these are religious groups that are adamantly anti-trans, and they'll use these groups in order to kind of like say like, hey, look, even feminists are saying this. And so there's this like weird meeting of the minds between people who really, I mean, it's like if they were able to achieve that goal, then those people would be like, they would be mortal enemies. Because I assume, I could be wrong, I assume a good deal of those feminists are at least like pro-choice.
Mm.
And there's all these different ways that those groups would like to subjugate that group. And so it reminds me a little bit of that, the
Yeah.
way that there has been this like, yeah, this meeting of the minds between like the just fucking just extreme fundamentalist Christianity and atheists. Is just like, how the fuck did we get here?
Yeah. Which, I mean, that might be a good segue into, like, in terms of the right wing peeling off the grifters that were already attached to the left might be a good way to get into talking about Tim Pool, because he has a
Sure, yeah.
similar origin story.
I was gonna say it would be good to like, as fascinating a topic as that is, might be good to kind of get into more
Yeah.
things that my channel is about these days.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. So let's talk about Tim Pool and how you came to be researching him, and we can kind of dive into that, and then we'll get into Lauren Southern after that if we have time left.
Yeah,
Does that
sure.
sound good? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in general, the I don't know if there's really anyone out there who's a major voice on the right who puts forth respectable arguments with any consistency. I'm sure I'm not blowing any minds by saying that. And Tim is one currently. I mean, maybe Steven Crowder has overtaken him. I'm not exactly sure. He, for at least a long period of time, if not currently, was the most influential political YouTuber on YouTube. He sort of has this David Rubin esque veneer to him, which is like, like a supposedly a disaffected liberal. Like if the libs just weren't so crazy these days, he'd be with them, but they're just so crazy that he has to vote Trump and all these other things that he puts for. I mean, there's so much to say about the guy that I don't know where to start. 90% of what he says is not just bullshit but gibberish. He's one of these
Yeah.
people who can kind of like in like a cast, like some sort of stream, he can just kind of wing it and sound like maybe he's saying things that make sense. And if you really hold up certainly the facts that he's putting out there to scrutiny, 95% of the time it's just very manipulated stuff. It's cherry picking, it's taking things from very specious sources. And i I think these people, I mean, he's someone who is dangerous for two reasons. One, because of his level of influence, and then also because even though that more and more people are kind of tuning into his grift, there are a fair amount of people who watch him who think like, oh yeah, this guy is either they think, oh yeah, this guy is ostensibly left wing, or they think he's a centrist, one of the two. He's neither.
Mm-hmm.
And the both of the videos that I made, one more so than the other, but both of them kind of dive into uh, very what I would say are important things that helped make him popular, and really were he was out there for a long time. He was full of shit for a long time, but he really started getting his footing into the YouTube mainstream through a few things. One was this trip to Sweden where he like did this really shitty documentation of a very one-sided documentation of the like what was going on in that area. Donald Trump had said that it was like basically a war zone, and this was a talking point, still is a talking point of the right, that Sweden has basically like gone to hell because of immigration, and it really couldn't be further from the truth. Not like it doesn't have some problems, but that's sort of typical, and the problems that they do have, of course. And I think that if you really look at the data, it's more points to just kind of the those who are refugees or immigrants, um or of the Islamic faith, because they get a lot of shit in this, who do kind of participate in I mean there is vastly overstated how much
Mm-hmm.
crime there is there, but my point is that those who do, they it's more than likely a poverty issue. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you when you have, I mean, this is sort of like a just a very normal thing when like for instance, when the Italian and the Irish came to America, they were lower class. They were lower class citizens. They were more, or they were considered such. I wouldn't look at them as such, but there was a higher rate of crime within those communities because of these socioeconomic factors.
Mm-hmm.
Same, I believe, same thing here.
Yeah.
But yeah. So just in
I think
general,
it's worth pointing out with
yeah,
this narrative that Tim is spinning there, and we'll talk about this more when we get to
yeah.
Lauren Southern, but all of this is just couched essentially in like a dog whistling of great replacement theory, which
Oh,
is like the yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, oh God, I don't know, like, because all these things are such cans of worms. But there was ostensibly, at the time that he did that, there was this literal like there's been paper from this group called ISD Global. They're an anti-extremist think tank, and they're very well respected. They did a paper on how in 2018 there was sort of like this coordinated push to put out all of this propaganda, because they knew that by kind of exploiting those issues, they could get a lot of converts to their extremely far right
Mhm.
political group called the Sweden Democrats. And he definitely helped a great deal. I mean, he's mentioned in not that paper, but well, Paul Joseph Watson, who he was working for when he went out there, is mentioned, but he's mentioned in other discussions on the topic. And there's no argument. I mean, he was
Mhm.
really like in my video. There was video that he did not um, publish, and that I was able to get my hands on. He did this interview, and actually, he didn't even conduct it. This guy who he was hanging out with, who he did not, he says he didn't know. but was very much in the ranks of that group. He brought him to this discussion, or this meeting with them, and gave them this like crazy softball interview. It was the other guy who was conducting the interview. He wasn't doing anything. So he's just, on one hand, he is a total lolcow, and most people who know of him on the left and are kind of, I don't know, in the same sphere that we are, realize that he is ridiculous, but so many people take him
Mm.
seriously. So I do think that it's important to kind of like really skewer these people as much as possible. And one thing that I'll say real quickly, that a lot of people, just to highlight this, my channel, even though that there's a lot of information that you'll find, it has a very comedic tone to it. And
Mm.
I think comedy, if done well, is a really great way of kind of, I think mockery is a good tool
Mm.
for changing minds. And there was just so much with him. There remains to be so much with him that is just hilariously. I mean, it's very, I just, there are some people, it's like, again, we talked about Sam Harris. I can understand how someone can look at Sam Harris and think like, oh yeah, okay, that guy's a genius, without like really scrutinizing what he has to say, because he's so well spoken and every now and then he has a good take. But someone like Tim Pool, I do not get it. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
it's just sort of like, if you pump out enough shit on the internet, like he gamed the system by
Mm.
putting out tons of videos, and I guess it's just that.
Well,
But
he
yeah.
he also like reinforces. So if you are willing to engage in the fantasy that Tim Pool
Mhm.
is a liberal,
Mhm.
well, and you're a conservative, then when you watch Tim Pool, you get all of your validation from him, because not only is it somebody telling you that the scary brown people are going to come and like do horrible things to your children, and like we're going to
Mhm.
have a civil war, but it's a lefty telling you that, so you get extra validation.
Yes,
I th-
absolutely. A lot of it is about like ego. It's funny because on one hand they mock leftists so much, but I think that deep down inside, I mean, this is all speculation. I think deep down inside, like, because you don't usually find that very much on the
Mhm.
left. People who are like, who are right wing, or who say that they're right wing, and they're just like, you know, like I have to side with the left because it's just the right. There are people like that, but there's no one out there who is really like there's no Tim Pool like that on
Mhm.
the right, and the left don't need that validation. So I have to ask, kind of like, what is that coming from? Aside from, I mean, like, why is it that they get this feeling of validation? And I think, again, maybe this isn't like that worthy of a thing to discuss, but I have my suspicions that in their hearts they realize that eh, the right wing is still pretty square. They liked to kind of like, they had that whole conservatism is the punk rock, new punk
Yeah.
rock shit, but they want so hard to believe that they're cool. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying like all of the left is cool. There's a lot of dorks, but it's certainly like overall like cooler, more permissive, more kind of like you be you and chill, in spite of all, this talk of cancel culture and
Yeah.
the big bad SJWs and whatnot. It's fucking cooler.
Yeah.
and
Like, maybe
and
that's just the whole
so
thing. We need, like, the
yeah,
right wing just is jealous because their parties suck.
yeah. I think it's a bit of that. I mean,
Yeah.
like a, they always complain about left wing Hollywood, yet
Mm.
they love the movies. I mean, they shit talk them, but they go to see them, and I don't know, yeah,
Yeah, well,
they
I mean, a lot
go on
like
about it.
I don't know about like your sort of like run of the mill conservatism, but like if you look at say just straight up fascism, like that is intensely rooted in insecurity, right? Like
Hmm. Oh yeah.
like it's basically like a shame fantasy, like at a certain point, like that's what MAGA was, right? You've been humiliated, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that there might be something to that, honestly. Just a whole bunch of people who are just intensely insecure about the fact that they're squares, so which really like is that's actually, if that's true, it's so fucking tragic. I got to take this beanie off. I can't do it anymore. Um, uh, but
All good.
it's so fucking tragic if not only are you just a square, but your idea of a cool, edgy lefty is fucking Tim Pool. Like,
Yes.
how sad are you that you look at Tim Pool and as, like, aspirationally cool?
Um, yeah, it's beyond sad. And I mean, there's so much derangement within the right, and it so much of their narratives kind of hinge on almost sometimes literally a religious like belief. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, eh,
Yeah, which
I
is, I has Tim Pool, like, I think he actually is, like didn't he, like, have ties to New Atheism? Like, he's not a religious dude.
I don't know I'm trying to think about like what his thoughts on I don't think he made many videos on atheism. I don't think he really made any.
Mm,
But he definitely kind of like teamed up with
mhm,
many people who are popular within that, Sargon being one.
mm,
I'm sure there's more. I'm a
yeah,
little tired, so can't think of it. But I mean, he became popular like at the start of his popularity. The the skeptics were still really big, so I don't know. Like if you see like cringe, cringe art, like I don't know if you've ever seen
like
shit
the
like this,
cringe
but like
compilations, like the SJW, like,
no, I'm
cringe
talking
thing.
about more like photoshops that like edge edge lord dorks would make, that like they'd put on Twitter and stuff, that kind of like, I don't know, take an Avengers poster and put like all these faces of people who are popular at the time on the right,
Mhm.
like you'd have like Blair White on Ray, and wait, is Ray the right? I'm trying to remember. I'm bad with names, but
From the Star Wars thing? Yeah, right.
yeah. You'd have Milo, you'd have Steven Crowder, you'd have maybe like Armored Skeptic and Shoe on Head, who were more right wing at the time. And my point is that like Tim Pool would be in those things, so he was seen as like within that crowd, even if he didn't really speak explicitly about um religion, or didn't
Gotcha.
speak about atheism per se.
Yeah. Um, I think with Tim Pool, like we touched on this, but particularly with Lauren Southern, I think I want to give like a brief overview of like what great replacement theory is before we get into
Sure.
talking about her, because for those that don't know, um, it's really kind of like the granddaddy conspiracy theory. Great replacement theory is essentially that the base layer of it is that the Jews control the world through a global network of conspiracy, and they are intentionally bringing black and brown people into white countries to outbreed the Gentiles and make them weaker so that the Jews can eventually take over and
Now,
control what the presently white countries.
now, just to
Now,
be
mhm,
perfectly fair to her,
mhm,
um, she has maintained, and there's evidence to suggest that she believes otherwise. But
right,
she never either said that, because the great replacement theory is basically the as I describe it in the Lauren Southern video, the um or rather white genocide is sort of like the older
mhm,
bastard trailer park son version of they're essentially the same thing,
yeah,
but they repackaged it to seem more more palatable
yeah.
to people.
So
And
they're
and
like
they often leave out the whole Jewish thing,
yeah,
but many people who pushed the great replacement theory, they actually do believe that. And the
yeah,
last thing I'll say very quickly is that it, automatically, just if you believe that this thing is happening, you have to think like, well, someone is responsible for it.
mhm,
Who is it? In her estimation, it was the globalists,
yeah,
which she swore didn't mean the Jews when she said it.
right.
But yeah,
Well,
but
that's kind of what I'm getting at is just laying the base layer of that is
yeah,
the bedrock of it, and then if you go a step up, you have well, we're not talking about the Jews anymore. We're talking about globalists.
yeah,
And then it's not white genocide anymore, it's immigration rates. And if you go a step up, not it's not globalists, it's like elitists.
yes,
And it's now we're not talking about immigration, we're talking about like culture. And you keep going up and up, and eventually the message is so watered down that it's
hmm
hitting all of the bog standard conservative talking points. But if you like what you hear and you go one layer down, well, now you're talking about the elites, and then you like, well, who are the elites? And you go one layer, like one YouTube click away. And at the bottom of this, it's all dog whistles down to the Jews are sending black people to kill all the whites. And
absolutely.
Lauren Southern operates kind of like in the upper, like she is your entry point into that sales funnel, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, one thing that I didn't get to touch on within the video that I really would have liked to is that this is a woman who very much kind of, there's the kind of cliche, we stand on the shoulder of giants, and she
Mhm.
stood on the shoulder of giant douchebags. She was horrible, but there is a spectrum of horribleness that is far worse than her.
Mhm.
However, she was very willing to like break bread with these people and do podcasts of people like, for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with Tara McCarthy. Tara McCarthy was at the, she was very like best friends with this girl Brittany Pettibone, who married this man Martin Sellner, who's huge in the identitarian movement. The reason why I bring up her, Brittany Pettibone and Tara McCarthy had a podcast, and Tara McCarthy is someone who you like, she just was not, she did not hide it. She would write tweets that basically said that miscegenation was equivalent to bestiality.
Mm.
There are interviews with her where she is saying like, I won't even, just trust me, like the most wretched shit ever, with her
Yeah.
crazy ass boyfriend, who has a video out there where he talks about like in an apocalypse he would literally he would literally cannibalize leftists. And
Is Pettibone, is that the one from Red Ice TV?
She has been on Red Ice TV, but she no, you're thinking of Hannah Letkoff.
Hana, okay,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. She was very involved in the identitarian movement, and what a lot of people don't realize about the identitarian movement, we get into it within the video very much so.
Mhm.
But the identitarian, I mean, like basically, the European identitarians, even though that there is a wealth of information out there that shows them to be exactly what they are, they were very much more so than, like, say, the alt-right. They were very savvy with optics, and they
Mhm.
tried as best they could to kind of come across a certain way. But if you really analyze their goals, their message, it's no different than
Mhm.
the American alt-right. It's just kind of wrapped up in a more kind of just seductive, I guess, package. and
Yeah.
and they make it seem like, like what they're fighting for is sensible, and more so than the alt-right, at least, or the American alt-right. The American alt-right, a lot of people don't know this, really sprang from what is called the Nouvelle Droite. I might be mispronouncing droite, which is French for new right. And at the beginning of, like, in Charlottesville, a great deal, and I believe the gentleman, I forget his name, who killed Heather Heyer, he was part of the identitarian group at the moment, which was Identity Europa. The
Mhm.
the founder of Identity Europa in America is this, like heinous ex Nazi who was still ostensibly a Nazi. And um and they basically, for rebranding purposes, uh once whatchamacallit once Charlottesville happened, they disbanded so that they could kind of start new groups and not have that kind of hovering over them, although it still does to some degree. And yeah, there's just so much cross pollination with these movements. And I hope I can add one thing real quick, which is one another thing that I didn't include in the video, which is that, I think that her reluctance to, I can't say for certain, I think her reluctance to embrace the alt-right had to do with the fact that she knew that Americans were not really that, they did not know what groups like Generation Identity were all about. So she could essentially, like, espouse the same things, but in a different way that wouldn't get her in more trouble. And this is the last thing I'll say. There are two videos that I would have loved to have used, but I didn't for brevity's sake, where both, are you familiar with the golden one? He's like this
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
beefcake Swedish, ostensibly Nazi dude, and
Yeah.
Richard Spencer. And in both these videos, they are sort of, the the golden one is just confused, and then Richard Spencer, I think, is, as awful as he is, every now and then he can have, like, a salient point when it comes to the understanding of the motives of people within his sphere, I think.
Mhm.
And so he was interviewed about Lauren Southern, and they had a discussion on Twitter where he was like, okay, so you say that you were ignorant to the aims of the alt-right. All right, I'll give you that, fine. But are you're endorsing the identitarians? Why are you doing this? Or like, do you understand what they stand for? And she said that, I believe in identitarianism within homelands. So she was saying that she believes in it within Europe. And the last thing I'll say is that both the Golden One and Richard Spencer made these videos where, they either were baffled or just very cynical, basically saying, like, yeah, it doesn't really make much sense that she supports this when, and doesn't support that, the American alt-right, because they knew that the goals were essentially the same. You know, the
Yeah.
the overarching goal of the identitarians is this thing called remigration, which is just a fancy way of achieving white ethnostates like the alt-right wanted to do. It's
Mhm.
absolutely an unworkable idea. It's a dangerous idea. So yeah.
Part of me wonders, because Southern is she has a level of shrewdness,
Mhm.
to her that I think a lot of, like, for instance, like, the Golden One doesn't.
Mhm.
Um, and part of me wonders if she is intelligent enough to recognize how viciously misogynistic, a lot of the alt-right I mean, it's all of them are
Oh, she's
deeply, deeply rooted in a hatred of women, like,
yeah.
on like, once you get past the racism and everything else, like, it's
Mhm.
hard to get past that, but if you just have a conversation with these people, they're viciously misogynistic, they
Sh
hate
sh
women,
she's
and I
seen it
wonder if
firsthand.
yeah, like, I wonder if her reticence to attach herself to that was because she kinda wanted to have her cake and eat it too. Like, she wanted to be a figure within this movement without directly attaching herself to
Well,
people who would tell her to stay in the kitchen.
that's what I was saying about well, two things to say about what you just did. One is that's kind somewhat what I was getting at
Mm.
with the standing on the shoulders of giant douchebags,
Mhm,
because I mentioned just one person, but the
mhm.
fact of the matter is that there's an endless supply of these people
Yeah.
who she would interview, who she would retweet, who she seemed to be very just, super friendly with, who would boost far I mean they were just more explicit about their beliefs. And I think that she was able to kind of really use a lot of people by kind of she I think she was savvy enough to realize, if I really commit to all of this, it could kind of come back to bite me in the ass.
Mhm.
I think she underestimated how, like, she still did that. And so, I in some ways, I don't know, it's kind of funny because, like, on one hand, I think it's better to endorse, like, the less outwardly fascist thing possible. But then at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, maybe I respect these, like just honest race, like at least they're kind of
Yeah.
not kind of hiding. So there's that. But then, to speak to specifically what you said, she felt that, I don't go into this, but she certainly felt that backlash. I mean, there are two things that I can bring up. One is that there was a point in time where, like, Andrew Anglin is the I think the main editor owner of Stormer, and so he wrote an article and started this conversation in alt-right circles of, like, why the fuck do we need women in this movement?
Mhm.
Like that, they just drag us down. And so, simultaneously, all these women who were within the movement were just getting dragged on, including her. And of course, she got a lot of shit at the time for, like, just not, uh, pumping out babies like a, like, just, yeah, like a factory. And then, last thing I'll say is, if you watch this documentary, White Noise, there is this scene where she is interviewed by Gavin McGinnis, and then Gavin McGinnis gives him a call, and it's very obvious that he is really pushing the line. You can't hear what he's saying, but it sounds like he's propositioning her from what she says. And then later in an interview, she says, like, I've had a lot of people who I really, who are heroes to me, really kind of disappoint. And it's clear that she's talking about experiencing sexism, and not just sexism, but probably, like, harassment
Mhm.
within the community. So it's not surprising, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, why can't we just have vicious, hateful racism and transphobia without the misogyny?
Well,
And
that's the thing very quickly. I mean, I'm sure you understand, but it's sort of like I think that all these movements, it's like if they were to achieve the goal of getting X culture or X group out
hmm
of the picture somehow, they would just move on to
yeah,
it might be, you know, the LGBT community. It, at a certain point, if they it's just a process of elimination. Like once
yeah,
like if they had just like the white ethno state that they want,
mm,
then the blonde-haired Aryans would be turning against the people who the brunettes who probably have some sort who have more like DNA that they think
mhm.
is degenerate,
Yeah.
some shit like that.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the guy who did the alt-right playbook goes into
Mhm.
that pretty heavily. I'll link
Oh,
that in the
does he?
down there part.
Yeah,
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 like
yeah.
talking about like say specifically like say the Proud Boys, right? Like
Mhm.
they have they're multi-ethnic, they're Western chauvinists, but if the Proud Boys took over America, well, all of a sudden we're not just Western chauvinists anymore. We're going to have to the 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 triangle at the top of who is at the top of that hierarchy just narrows and narrows and narrows and narrows until it's just pure-blooded, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guys, and anybody else is going to get you know a
Yeah,
face full of Zyklon B.
absolutely, absolutely. And the alt-right playbook is a series that I've watched a few episodes of, but I've been meaning to kind of like dive into the full,
Yeah.
just watch them all.
Yeah, I would suggest to anybody who is listening to this, number one, go watch Hey It's Vadim's videos on Tim Pool and Lauren Southern, and then go check out the alt-right playbook. There'll be links to all of that in the bottom part.
Check out my
Um,
video on Elon Musk as well.
oh, I didn't know you
If
had a
you
video on Musk. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to watch that.
I have a video on Musk, and it didn't get as many views as I think it would have. I think on the surface, because it's called Elon and SNL behind the Muskaganda, and I use the because there's actually quite a bit of just just propaganda infused into nearly every sketch that he was in,
hmm
and I think a lot of people just thought it was probably just a review of that episode, whereas it's more kind of like we see just little bits, certain jokes that are made, and kind of how they correspond to who he is as a person. And it's much more of kind of like an exploration of Elon Musk himself than it has to do with SNL, even though that some of that is important.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Everybody go check that out. I'm gonna watch that when we wrap up the interview. Is there? I think we hit everything we wanted to talk about, man. Is there anything else that you want people to know about you or what you do that we can get into?
Let me think about that. I consider myself like, I like this sort of like recently I've been doing videos that are more kind of geared towards just real in-depth
hmm
investigations, and I kind of
You do it very
I
well, I might
thank
add.
you.
Like
Thank
I
you.
like it a lot.
I have recently, maybe I'm patting myself too much on the back by saying this, but I sort of think of myself recently as like the Columbo of left tube. I really do a great deal of research, and I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm going to be able to kind of sustain, because it's sort of like I have this model that it would be doable if I had kind of the support that, say, big names like Sean,
hmm
H. Bomber guy, all of whom I think are fantastic. But I'm not saying that my Patreon is peanuts, but it's a lot. Like I have to kind of put out more material,
hmm
and I'm not saying that that aspect is going to be gone from my videos, but I'm probably going to be making some shorter videos, some videos that aren't quite who knows? Maybe I will make them as best I can, and they will still be very entertaining and informative, but they may not be like the bombshell exposés
Hmm.
that those two videos are. I think the next video that I'm going to be doing is going to be titled "The Political Nihilism of Jimmy Dore,"
Hmm.
and I'm kind of going into him and really how he doesn't really, in my opinion, stand for anything, doesn't
Yeah.
offer any like, but um, I mean, I guess I would say that my goal is always to equally entertain and inform. Although I kind of very much kind of think activism is a necessary thing and I admire it. I would not go as far to call myself an activist because I think that that's very much a big part of that is doing on the ground work
Hmm.
and whatnot. But I try and make my videos like just giving people a unique visual and kind of story experience is just as important to me as like the material that I'm making because I don't know, I have a bit of like a wannabe filmmaker in me and yeah, so if you watch my videos, they're kind of geared towards they're very visual. There's a lot of jokes and I try to make this material as fun often it's sometimes dark. I mean, I think all of it is dark when you're dealing with like these like wretched figures,
Hmm.
and in spite of that, some people who are listening to this may not realize like the videos are fun. Even I I mean the video on Lauren is a little difficult at times because we're talking about some, the scum of the earth and
Hmm.
there's like a roughness to the topic, if for lack of a better way of putting it. But I've been told that I make these subjects about as entertaining as they can be without kind of like stretching the, kind of veering into tackiness or being tone
Yeah.
deaf because yeah.
No, I think you balance it quite well. I find your videos entertaining and funny where they're supposed to be funny, and they're serious where they need to be serious. I think you do a good job with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy the content of yours that I've seen. I think other people should check it out. I think you deserve a lot more subscribers than you presently have, and I hope this in some way helps contribute to that. But I do want to
Mhm.
say, when I first started doing YouTube, I was trying to do like deep dive research stuff. And I have a lot of sympathy for how much effort that really takes. Like, I don't think people realize just how much time is involved in doing that. And one of the reasons that I do interviews now is I ultimately didn't have the time.
Mhm.
And I think if anybody who likes what you do and really enjoys the in depth research, the time that you put into it, I would encourage everybody to support you and your Patreon, which will be in the link in the down there part. So
Well,
everybody go check out
thank
Vadim's
you.
Patreon. And
Yeah, and if you just to add a couple quick things, if you if you go to any one of my videos, if you would rather make a one-time donation, I have a PayPal link for that. And then two, if a lot of us just don't have the resources, there's a lot of great things that you can do for free. Don't underestimate just watching the videos, liking the videos, commenting on the videos, and then you can follow me at HeyItsVadim on Twitter. And whenever I have a new video up, I will have that video as a pinned comment on my Twitter and retweeting those. When you get a good deal of retweets on a video, it really does help kind of spike things. So that is an excellent, very helpful thing that those who, just can't commit to giving money, most people can't. I understand that. It's a very helpful thing that one can do. And yeah, so anyone who considers doing that, thank you so much. You're awesome. High five.
Yep. And so I guess as we wrap up, just tell everybody where they can find you online on the Tweety Spaces and where have you.
Sure. Once again, it's HeyItsVadim. There's no apostrophe in that. My name is spelled Vadim. For those who, it's a kind of a unique name, so not everybody knows. So, Hey, it's Vadim on Twitter. If you search the same on YouTube, and also if you put in Creationist Cat, because it's linked to that, it's the same. It was formerly Creationist Cat. You can find it that way. And that's me on YouTube. Those are my major links. I might start doing some Twitch streaming, but I haven't really started with that. And my Twitch is HeyItsVadim, but there's nothing on it. Maybe there will be by the time this goes up. I don't know. But yeah, those every any like I'm not really active on Facebook, but any place where you're going to try and find me, hey, it's Vadim is just what to type in. And yeah, I guess that's how to find me. You could also, if I mean, I guess you're putting it in the back and down there,
Yeah.
but you want to find my Patreon, it's there. And
Yeah.
again,
And links to all this stuff will be in the show
Yeah.
notes for everybody listening.
Yeah. And then lastly, if you just click on a video and you look in the info box, you'll find all of that information in there as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, Vadim, thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
All right.
It's been fun.
It's been a blast, man. Hey everybody, Mark Edwards again, and I want to thank you all for watching. I want to say a special thank you to my patrons whose names are on screen somewhere around here. I really appreciate you giving me what you can afford to give me. It really means a lot to me, and it helps keep the lights on over here. I use that money to pay for editing software and things like that. If you would like to become a patron and help me keep the lights on over here, I would really appreciate it. Currently, this whole operation is probably about $80 a month in the whole, in terms of web hosting and hosting the podcast and all the other stuff associated with it. So I have a personal goal of $200 a month to get the Patreon up to, and that will put me in the black. That means this will be a labor of love that doesn't cost me any money. And that's my initial goal. That's what I'm trying to get to. So if you think that you can help me do that, head on over to Patreon at UltravioletPod and just give me whatever amount you think I deserve and whatever you're capable of giving. If you'd like to give a one-time tip, you can do that at PayPal, Venmo, or Coffee, also at UltravioletPod. That also helps immensely, and I really, really appreciate it. If you are not able to support the show financially, which I absolutely understand, I've been in that position before, I will not hold it against you, but I would truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart if you were to support the show in other ways. You can do that by liking the video on YouTube, by commenting on the video for the algorithm. You can leave a 5-star review on iTunes, leave a comment there as well. You can share this content on social media, wherever you have an audience. You can get the word out, bring more people in. That really helps me as well, and I really, really appreciate it, and it's something you can do for free. If you want to follow me on social media, I am on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at UltravioletPod. I'm mostly active on Twitter. Every once in a while, I'll post a picture of my cat on Instagram, and on Facebook, I pretty much just post new episodes. But that's where you can find me. Once again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate everybody who just takes the time to listen to me talk to people. It's really heartwarming just to know that you can start a podcast in your mid-30s and talk about stuff and people will be interested and listen to what you have to say. So I'm really thankful every time I make one of these, and I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate it, and I will see you on the next one.